Here we are, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, March the 4th, 2024, 2:04 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. My name's Dave McRae, coming to you live from the Voiceman Studios in Toronto, Canada. This is episode 244 of McRae Live. Friday the 13th, Jason Blum wants Jason Vorhees. Do it again! Do it again. But what do you want? This is actually not new news. It was reported on a couple of days ago. Everybody in the horror community runs with old news like it's new news. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen an article about how Robert Englund thinks Kevin Bacon should be the next Freddy Krueger, and he said that like 6 or 7 years ago. And you still have people going, holy shit, did you see? Did you hear? And it's like, yeah, this is just... With all due respect, there are some outlets, not including Bloody Disgusting, because they are one of the heavyweights in the space. They don't tend to recycle the same stuff, and if they are, it is usually because they have an angle to it and they want to kind of they're drawing a connection. It's like me. It's like, I know when I repeat myself. I've been accused of like, he says the same thing. No, I know I'm repeating myself. I will repeat myself to make a point on something because I have new information, whatever the case is. But there are some outlets online that will just run because it's a slow news day. So they're just like, hey, did you hear that Robert Englund thinks Kevin Bacon should be the next Freddy Krueger? And, you know, the internet's like, holy shit! And it's like, yeah, he said that like in 2018 and even before that. Anyway, Kevin Bacon's nearly 70 himself. It's not going to happen. So, and it's kind of funny how you have some people, no one else but Robert Englund. You have all these people that no one else but Robert Englund. But yet at the same time, they're like, yeah, Kevin Bacon, okay. It's like, I don't, what? What's going on? What happened to these? What's going on? Anyway, we're not here to talk about Freddy Krueger. We are here to talk about Jason Vorhees. This is not new news, by the way. This is not new news. This is something that Jason Blum has been very vocal about for a couple of years at least. But he was interviewed. There was another interview he was doing with Collider probably about something completely unrelated. And he was asked about Friday the 13th. As we know right now, A24's got that series that they are doing. Now, there was a bit of a hiccup, obviously, and there is a delay because obviously there was the writer's strike and then there was the actor's strike. And of course, that puts a huge wedge into things and back things up. Hopefully, they go into, if they haven't already and they had to stop. I don't think they had started shooting yet. I stand to be corrected, but I don't think they had started shooting yet. And then they had to stop because of the actors' strike. I don't think so. Although I'm open to be corrected. But certainly, hopefully we can get that going this year. Will we see it come to the screen this year? Maybe. I have a feeling the answer is going to be no. It's probably going to be not till next year. But nonetheless, of course, that's the television series. Very much looking forward to that. We will be talking about Crystal Lake here on the channel for sure. Is that the name of the show? Crystal Lake? Is that out there? I can't even remember now. It's been so long since we've even discussed anything about it. But certainly we will be talking about the Friday the 13th TV series here on the channel. But you know what? It's always interesting when Jason Blum speaks, because Jason Blum is, whether you like him or not, and let's be honest, none of us know him personally, so he's probably a hell of a guy. But whether you like his movies or not, whether you like Blumhouse as a production company or not, and that's what they are, they're a production company, not a studio. If you like their movies, the movies they make, the movies they put together, my hoodie's all over the place here. There we go, all better. You know, at the end of the day becomes irrelevant because he is the king of mainstream Hollywood horror. That doesn't mean that A24 is not doing stuff. That doesn't mean that Paramount's not going to put out, you know, a horror. It doesn't mean there aren't others that don't get into the game, but Blumhouse is horror. They are synonymous with horror. And their business model, which of course is producing low budget horror that makes a lot of money. And when we say low budget, you know, we're talking, I would say, generally speaking, $30 million and under. Now, when Blumhouse first sprung onto the scene, they were, making horror movies for like, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million bucks. And they still do that from time to time. But of course that has expanded a little bit. And even a $30 million movie today is like nothing in the world of Hollywood film. So, but that is their business model and they're very good at it. However, they do a lot. And there's a lot of great things that Jason Blum brings to the table. He's known to give a lot of creative control and freedom to his filmmakers and to his directors, which is really good. He's been known to give a lot of sort of, not name directors or filmmakers a chance. Now, I don't mean they just pick them out of the street. I mean, obviously they have to be, experienced on some level. They had to have had, they have to have some sort of portfolio and some sort of movies they've made, of course. I don't think he's necessarily plucking them out of film school, although I don't know. But he's been known to be able to give new up and coming sort of talent, a shot. He's been known to kind of be not so hands-on-y, and which is pretty cool. So there's a lot of good, obviously, with Blumhouse. The problem with Blumhouse, and this isn't necessarily just a Blumhouse thing, this is just, anybody who sort of is firing at this level, is he makes, and I say he, I mean the production company itself, makes a lot of horror movies. And they get into the game and they churn out tons of product. And when you do that, right, when you're not, when you do that, you will inevitably churn out some good stuff and you will churn out a lot of bad stuff too, what we perceive as not very good in terms of quality, whether that's just the story or just, I don't know, the movie's just not that good or exciting or whatever the case is, right? Run of the mill, predictable, whatever the case is. And that can happen. That does. And when you get to Blumhouse's level, that's definitely happening. However, they are still the kings of horror right now. And let's be honest, if Blumhouse came to me and said, hey, Dave, we would love you to direct, I don't know, X. I don't mean X, I mean like, fill in the blank X, not X, that's already been shot. But, like we want you to shoot, fill in the blank. What am I going to, unless it's a story that or a film, I'm just like, oh, I can't do that. I don't, whatever the case is. But if it's something that I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What am I going to say? No? No, sorry, Jason Blum, because no, of course not. They're still the kings. They can still, elevate your career. They can still have a great impact, and there's an opportunity there, right? They give some good opportunities, but again, because they are, I don't want to say they have a monopoly. They don't have a monopoly, but they certainly are one of the only big horror specific and centric only production companies. Of course, they're getting into gaming now and all that kind of stuff as well. And he's been very successful, and his business model, generally speaking, the business model works. It works. He makes, because even if movies are bad, right? Even if movies are bad or what we perceive as bad, because it is subjective, but even if movies don't do well, okay, if you're making them for pennies, let's say they make a horror movie for $10 million, right? That doesn't include marketing. So let's say it's $20 million. They spent $20 million between the production budget and marketing, and they've marketed it really well. It's really great. You release it at the right time of year. It's targeted towards the right demographic and the right audience, and the trailers look great, and the marketing is great, and the posters are great, and the social media campaigns are great, and everybody's getting in on it, and the channels are talking about all this kind of stuff. And it makes like $22 million opening weekend. Well, holy shit, right? And then it ends its run with like $56 million bucks, right? So it's probably, just broke even. It's made a little bit of money. Because remember, when a movie makes $56 million at the box office, the studio doesn't get $56 million, right? There's overhead, there's interest they got to pay back to the banks, there's, the cut that the theaters take. But if it made $56 million bucks on a, $10 million budget, whatever, yeah, they've made some money there, right? And so that's what they specialize in. That's what they do. So, I just wanted to set the table for that because I think a lot of people, Blumhouse has a bit of a kind of a hit and miss, and they are hit and miss, and they've kind of been an easy target for a lot of horror fans. But at the end of the day, any filmmaker in my position right now would certainly not be like, Blumhouse is calling? Yeah. I don't think so. It's like, no, you would pick up that phone. Anybody would. They are still the biggest players in the game right now when it comes to horror, and they do churn out some good horror movies. Friday the 13th. Jason Blum has wanted this for quite some time. This is not new news. Let's go over to the other screen and look at this article coming to us from Bloody Disgusting, John Squires. Jason Blum is still, see, that's the operative word there, still, because again, this is not new news. Jason Blum is still trying to will a Blumhouse Friday the 13th movie into existence. All right, let's check it out. What's going on with the Friday the 13th franchise? The saga has been on hold for several years now due to a messy legal issue. But Jason Vorhees is finally set to return in a brand new series from Brian Fuller, A24, and Peacock titled Crystal Lake. Okay, so I was right. I did remember correctly. Okay, there we go. It's coming soon, possibly even later this year. But what about a new installment in the feature film franchise? For what it's worth, Jason Blum is still trying to make something happen. Let me close it. Oh, okay, there we go. Fucking pop-ups. Is still trying to make something happen in that department. Blum has been saying for years that he wants to bring the Friday the 13th franchise into the Blumhouse family. And it sounds like he hasn't yet given up on those hopes. Speaking with Collider just this week, Blum once again expressed an interest in getting his hands on Jason Vorhees. Blum told the outlet, Friday the 13th is not a Blumhouse project, but I'm trying to will it into being one. It's just a piece of IP I've always loved. Blum went on to say, and James Wan and Atomic Monster are very passionate about it. And I think we would have, and I think we would have them shepherd it for us. That would be a lot of fun. Blumhouse and James Wan's company, Atomic Monster, just inked a massive merger at the start of this year. The two companies forming a mega house of chills and thrills. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to imagine Blum and Wan working together on a Friday the 13th movie down the road. But as Blum notes, it's a little more than a pipe dream at this time. Meanwhile, Peacock has given a straight-to-series order to their aforementioned series, with Crystal Lake being described as an expanded prequel to the original Friday the 13th franchise. So, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Interesting. Again, not new news, but interesting nonetheless. And what do I think? Do I think that Blumhouse is a good fit for Friday the 13th? Well, I don't know. I think there are other... Well, let's just put it this way. I think when if we were talking about between Elm Street and Friday the 13th, I would say that Friday the 13th is definitely a better fit for Blumhouse than something like Elm Street, in my opinion, just because of where I think the Elm Street brand and sort of IP needs to go into the darker territory. I don't know if Blumhouse would be quite a good fit for it. At the same time, is it good that somebody like a Blumhouse, they have Halloween? Well, they had it, of course, but they made their Halloween trilogy. Now they want to get Friday the 13th. They don't have Scream. Obviously, that's still with Sony, right? Sony and Spyglass. Was it Sony or Spyglass? Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong on that. But anyway, is it good that they also have Jason? Maybe. And let's also say this, because this is important as well, because I've seen a lot of people say that they're excited because it looks like that. I think they're misreading sort of what has been stated here. At least I think it's too premature to suggest that this is what would happen. I've seen a few people suggest by this news and reading the article that this somehow means that James Wan would be directing a new Friday the 13th movie. And that's not what Jason Blum is saying here. That is not what he is insinuating or suggesting. We have to remember that Jason Blum's production company, Atomic Monster, has merged and joined forces with Jason Blum's production production company, which is Blumhouse. So you have two production companies that are merging together, two horror production companies that are sort of merging and agreeing to work together. So James Wan is essentially the Jason Blum of Atomic Monster. That doesn't mean that everything that Atomic Monster gets their hands on or involved with, that James Wan is directing or even writing. It doesn't mean that at all. So this isn't necessarily a situation where James Wan would be directing a Friday the 13th. We have to please keep that in mind. That's not what the article is saying. That's not even what Jason Blum is saying. Now, that doesn't mean, like I just said, that maybe if you were to talk to Jason Blum privately and, you know, you're having a beer with him or something, hey, what do you think about James Wan? He might say, oh yeah, no, for sure. Oh, fuck, I hope James does it, man. I think it'd be great. And maybe James Wan wants to do it. Maybe he does. But that's not what this article is saying, and that's not what this recent news is saying. It's talking about James Wan's production company helping to spearhead a Friday the 13th into existence. So you would likely see James Wan as a producer helping to spearhead it. So he might be the one that hires, you know, him and Jason Blum work together to be able to spearhead it, and they work on, you know, the direction, hiring the writers, the director, all that kind of stuff. So it's not necessarily a Friday the 13th film directed by James Wan, but it's not necessarily not either. Right? We don't know yet whether, you know, he has any interest in even directing that. At least as far as I know, I haven't seen any evidence of that. And I would think that if it was out there that James Wan said, no, I want to direct, like how Mike Flanagan has often said, I want to direct A Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, we know that that's out there. He's talked about that on X. He's talked, you know what I mean? He's tweeted about that. James Wan would love to get his hands on the Friday the 13th IP. He's passionate about it just as much as Jason Blum, but not necessarily in a directing role. He might be like, nah, I'll spearhead it. I'll produce it. You know, I'll will it into existence with Jason Blum, but I have no interest in actually directing it. We don't know. Maybe he does. Do I think that Friday the 13th is a good fit? You know, I mean, in terms of like the marketing dollars and the reach and the promotion, and yeah, I mean, let's be honest, like you can't go. And again, please remember, folks, is that they want to appeal to the fans. That's very important. Absolutely 100%. But general movie-going audience is huge. And when you're with Blumhouse and your reach and your marketing dollars and your partnership with Universal and, you know, whatever the case is, I mean, it's massive. And, you know, when I think about it from a business perspective, Blumhouse is fantastic. It is fantastic. Even Elm Street, right? When you think about it from a business perspective, I mean, you can't go wrong with Blumhouse. It's like if they came to me and said, Dave, you know, that thing, you know, that you're working on right now, you know, that project that you've wanted to do for years and you're working on right now. Hey, listen, we're interested. Let's talk. I mean, I would be, even though I don't think it would be stupid not to take that call. And it's like, well, it is Blum. Jesus. I mean, the resources that you could have, you know what I mean? And the appeal and the marketing and the dollars and it's huge. I mean, from a business perspective, a Friday the 13th film produced from Blumhouse and Atomic Monster is absolutely fantastic. I mean, it is. From a business perspective, 100%. You got James Wan and Jason Blum, and it's like, holy fuck, right? When we think about the style and the type of horror movies that Blumhouse tends to do, well, let's be honest, it's hit and miss, but one thing I do admire about them is that they do take chances, and sometimes it doesn't work, you know, and sometimes it does. You know, so I don't know. Look, at the end of the day, it's going to come down to sort of it's going to come down to the template, the premise and the direction for what they want to do with Friday the 13th. I often hear, excuse me, I often hear about, it's so easy to do a Friday the 13th movie. Why haven't we had one since 2009? It's so easy. It's so easy. It's just, you stick a bunch of people at a camp and, you got a jock and a girl with big boobs and you have sex scenes and you just run along. And it's just put Jason in there and just kill. It's so easy. Well, that's part of the problem. It's not 1983 anymore. Right. And that, although that might appeal to you because you are nostalgic for that, because you're, hitting middle age like me, then yeah, maybe. But to appeal to a general movie going audience today is very different. And I'm not saying that that wouldn't be sort of still kind of the root of a Friday the 13th film. But I think today there needs to be a little more. I don't think you can just have a Friday the 13th movie. And that's what they sort of tried to do in the 2009 remake, right? They tried to add, it wasn't just kids at a camp getting killed. It was a girl goes missing. Her brother goes looking for her. Do you know what I mean? And you have the kids at the camp, yes, but you have this subplot that lingers and connects to the main plot. And they tried to kind of, do you know what I mean? And so I don't think it is that easy anymore. I don't, and especially if you want longevity. If you want longevity in a Friday the 13th franchise, I mean, sure, yes, because of nostalgia, because of the feels and nostalgia, you could deliver a Friday the 13th movie in 2026, let's say, and have it just kids at a camp and Jason killing people. And literally that's it. As one-dimensional as like the first, 4 Friday films, you could literally just do that and it would probably make boatloads of money. But the problem is that you don't have longevity in that. And you had that in the 80s, okay, because it was the 80s. And that was new back then. It was new, and even then the films, got tired, right? but that it was a completely different era. You can't do that today. You can't start there, because where do you go? Right? Where do you go? So I think there's got to be more meat on the bone. Look at what they're trying to do with the Crystal Lake TV series. Right now, that's A24. That's likely going to be a bit grittier, a bit more mature. But they're doing a prequel, right? And that's okay, because when it comes to Friday the 13th, as I've mentioned a number of times, Jason is not built on the same foundation as Michael Myers, right? Michael Myers is built, I'm not saying where he went, but the inception, right? The foundation of the Michael character is built all around ambiguity, enigma, mystique, not knowing why, that's how the character is built. Jason's completely different. We know at the end of the first movie, we know that he was a kid that drowned in the lake and that his mother is back killing the kids, and he comes back later because he supposedly witnessed his mother's head being chopped off on the shore, and then he comes back to avenge, and that's his. We know all that. We know the backstory. It's like Freddy, right? Freddy and Jason were not built on the foundation of ambiguity, right? That's not really why their character works. That doesn't mean you can't have mystery and mystique around them, but certainly their backstory is very, very well known. So doing a prequel series to the Friday the 13th franchise is okay. I actually feel like doing a prequel series to Halloween, you run into demystifying Michael Myers too much, and then you sort of lose. You actually don't, in my opinion, you actually don't make the character better. You make him weaker by showing and revealing so much. Whereas Jason and Freddy, you actually might make the character more interesting and stronger by going back, right? And that's sort of what they want to do with the Friday the 13th franchise in terms of this Crystal Lake prequel series. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do, but there's got to be more meat on the bone. And I think that, as much as people are upset about, the recent Halloween films, they made boatloads of money at the box office. Between the 3 films, it's $500 million. Now, again, the studio, doesn't receive that. That's $500 million gross. Okay. It's kind of like, if you make $100,000 a year, you don't get $100,000 into your account. There's a lot of variables that have to come off first, right? It's the same thing here. So it grossed $500 million at the worldwide box office. But again, there's overhead and there's taxes and there's, interest you got to pay back to the bank, and the theaters take their cut. And so, but it still grossed $500 million between 3 films. That's a gigantic win financially from a business perspective. And so Blumhouse, again, from a business perspective, I think it makes sense. From a creative perspective, I might feel, I would feel more excited from a creative perspective if James Wan was attached to maybe direct. Now, again, we have no evidence to suggest that that is what's going to happen. Remember, his production company, Atomic Monster, would love to get in on the game, but that doesn't mean he's going to direct, right? It doesn't mean that. It just might mean he oversees it, he produces it. But if he gets in on directing it, now he hasn't done, I mean, think of it this way, right? He did the very first Saw, okay? Saw is one of the great, whether you like all the Saw movies or not, it's one of the big horror franchises. That's because of James Wan. Look at The Conjuring, right? He directed the first two. Now, despite what you think about The Devil Made Me Do It and what this fourth one's going to be like, and the more expanded universe of Annabelle and all that, that first one, and that's James, he kicked it off. Look at Insidious. Now, despite what you might think about the Red Door and, whatever, he kicked that off. So he has, begun, he has started 3 gigantic, massive, multi-million-dollar horror franchises that in 20 years will be looked back upon like how we right now look at Freddy, Jason, and Michael. Insidious, The Conjuring, and Saw are 21st century staples and 21st century movies. And there is, maybe not us, but there is a generation, like how we grew up with Freddy and Jason and Michael through the 80s and the 90s. There is a generation that is younger than us that have grown up with Saw and The Conjuring and Insidious, that in 20 years from now, they're going to look back on these. It's all relative, right? I mean, believe it or not, as I think of the 80s very, nostalgic, and I think of the 90s, my teenager years. And believe it or not, there are teenagers right now that in 30 years are going to look back at 2024 as a real nostalgic year. Oh, remember 2024? Those were the days. Now, it sounds weird to us guys in our 40s, right? Sounds very weird because we're like, 2024, fuck it, the good old days are long ago. But it's relative, right? If you're 17 right now, you'll probably look back at 2024 like how we look back at like 1994. And so, it's that will happen. And James Wan is responsible for that. And that first Insidious is great. One of the best studio released horror movies of the last 20 years. That first Conjuring is great. One of the best studio released horror movies of the last 20 years. That first Saw is great. One of the best studio released horror movies of the last 25 years. I mean, this is, it's not bad to have him on board. Because I do think that, James Wan and Blumhouse and, there's a good chance that they will bring, hopefully, and I say this with a little grain of salt because I don't mean elevate it, but a little bit of sophistication to it, because I don't think you can just do the same thing over and over. I don't mean elevate it to like Hereditary. I mean, just like you add a bit of something there, and you really dive into the backstory of Jason, and you hire writers and people that know the mythology, know the character, so they can appeal to the fan base, but also taking it in a new direction and making it new. So it's keeping the DNA there, but also moving it forward. If I can pat myself on the back a little bit here, I know I'm about to toot my own horn, but it's like what we did. It's like what I feel we did with Billy, right? It's me, Billy. You look at, Black Christmas, and there's been a lot of people that have reached out to me and said, this is better than the 2 remakes. And it feels like it lives and it breathes in the same universe. It feels like it's you know what I mean? And that's what you want. Now, this would likely be a complete remake, so it's not a direct sequel. So you do have an opportunity to, create a new foundation. But as long as it still feels like the DNA of Friday the 13th that we know and love, that's really important. And hiring the right people is really important to that. And I think James Wan is a very smart producer. I think he's a smart director and writer, and he definitely knows horror. I even like Malignant. I know a lot of people didn't quite like it because of the risks it took and the direction it went in, but I appreciate what he did. And sometimes you're going to hit and sometimes you're not, but I'm open to Friday the 13th going to Blumhouse. the fan in me is like, oh, I don't want Blumhouse to have everything. You know what I mean? Because, you want more voices, but because Atomic Monster would be heavily involved, if not actually taking the lead, it makes me a little more open to the idea about it, because it's a joint venture. Not just Blumhouse, right? Remember, Atomic Monster wasn't involved in the Halloween films, right? Atomic Monster, had nothing to do with it. And so this would be different. This would be Jason Blum absolutely being a part of it, but really allowing Wan and his team to kind of spearhead it and produce it and, have it come over, or have it sort of, wish it into existence, make it happen. So I'm open to it. I am. But I would be very excited and very interested if James Wan said, okay, I am going to step into the director chair. I'm not just going to produce it. I'm actually going to step into the director chair and kick it off. Because look what he did with the Conjuring universe. Look what he did with the Insidious universe. Look what he did with the Saw universe, right? And so could he do that with a Friday the 13th universe? Could he kick off and deliver a fantastic Friday the 13th movie where we're all like, wow, that was really good? And then maybe he hands it off, or maybe he comes back and does the first two. I know he didn't do Saw 2, I don't think, but he did the first two Conjuring. He did the first two Insidious. Maybe he comes back and he does the first two Friday the 13th, right? He kind of kicks it off, gets the ball rolling, then hands it off to another competent director. Who knows? I mean, I'm open to it. I'm not vehemently completely against it as some people are, because I think there are certain fans that when they hear the Blumhouse name, they just think about all the movies that they were disappointed by, but they've released some great movies as well. And so that's just the nature of the more movies you make, you're bound to have some that don't hit. I mean, even the great Christopher Nolan, all you Nolan fanboys out there. I mean, I'm sure there are some movies you think are absolutely fantastic, and then others you're like, I mean, that's just the nature of, telling story. I mean, everybody has a bad day at the office, or everybody makes movies that aren't for you, or some movies do better than others. That's just the nature of the game. But when it comes to Friday the 13th and Blumhouse and Atomic Monster, from a business perspective, it makes sense. From a creative perspective, if you've got Wan and his team in there, makes sense. I mean, this is not fucking Shakespeare here, people. It makes sense, and I wouldn't mind seeing it. If Atomic Monster wasn't involved and Wan wasn't involved, and it was just Jason Blum, and it was the same team from Halloween, then I might be a little like, I don't know, because I wasn't overly... although there are things about the new Halloween trilogy that I do like for sure. Overall, it didn't really kind of jive with me in the ways that I had hoped, but there's redeeming qualities that I do like in every one of those films, even Halloween Ends. And even The Exorcist Believer, right? I don't think it's the catastrophic dumpster fire that people say it is. I really don't. I think the hyperbolic nature for which people are calling that the worst movie ever made is just coming from fans that are just don't know their asses from their elbows, or just haven't actually seen a dumpster fire film before in their lives. I'm not saying it's as good as the original Exorcist. Of course it's not. But I don't think it, well, I talk all about it on my channel, but they've released great movies too. And so I'm open to it. I'm open to the idea of Blumhouse and Atomic Monster with James Wan and Jason Blum working together to see if they could figure out a way to finally bring Jason Vorhees back to the big screen. I'm open to it. I'm curious to hear more. I'm curious to hear more about the direction and what they want to do with it, because they can't just make it kids at a camp, people having sex, Jason shows up, and that's the end. You can't do that anymore. I mean, that can be a part of it. Sure, because that's part of the DNA. But you can't just do that and only that, because where do you go? There has to be a little more meat on the bone, in my opinion. Anyways, folks, let's jump over to the chat room and see what you are all saying. If you're watching live or after the fact, jump into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on Jason Blum wanting Friday the 13th. And I will imagine that a lot of the comments will be, fuck Blumhouse, I hate Blumhouse, they make shitty horror movies, which is not true at all. Just like anybody who listen, if you hate Blumhouse because you think they make shitty horror movies, then you have to hate every studio on the face of the planet, because Universal will churn out great movies and bad movies, and Paramount and Sony and Warner Brothers and A24 and everybody. I mean, the more movies you make, nobody's going to have a perfect record. It's just not going to happen, right? The question is, does Blumhouse have the resources and the capacity and the connections and the ability with working with Atomic Monster and James Wan? Is there a high probability, a good probability, that there could be a good Friday the 13th movie on our horizon here? And I think the probability is yes. That doesn't mean it will, but I think the probability is in the yes area that I think they could do that. But we'll see what happens. All right. Now, a couple of super chats did come in. Let me get these super chats here. We've got Amaducia sends in $5. Thank you, Amaducia. It says, hey, Dave, can't stay for the whole show. Just wanted to say cheers. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And Michael K sends in a member chat. No, Michael K is a new member, excuse me. Well, thank you, Michael K, for becoming a new member here on the channel. I really appreciate that. And Josh McKenna sends in a very generous super chat of $19.99. Thank you, Josh. And says, I volunteer as crew in live theater. Very cool. And I feel appreciated by the actors on set and have made great friends. That's awesome. That's amazing. I've been lucky to work with actors who let me know I'm appreciated as crew because I've heard some horror stories. Oh, yeah, no, for sure. I mean, listen, I can tell you, your crew is the backbone of your project. Whether you're doing theater or whether you're doing film or television, your crew, it works incredibly hard. I mean, it was one of the reasons why, unfortunately, when Olivia Hussey had to back out of It's Me, Billy Chapter 2 because of health, Bruce and I knew that we would reinvest the money, obviously, back into the project. The money that was going to go to her between her salary and the flights and the hotel and all that kind of stuff. We would reinvest that money back into the project. And one of the big ways we did that was reinvest it into the crew. And the crew were very appreciative of that, let me tell you. Because, when you're making a low budget independent horror movie, it can be all over it can be all over, let's say. Now, some of our crew were, of course, a part of IATSE, but, so there's certain rules and regulations in place. But, as a good rule of thumb, you want to take care of your crew. You want to take care of your crew, and you want to make sure that they're well taken care of, because they're working hard for you, man. They are working hard for you to help your vision come to life. And so that was one of the reasons, we reinvested that money into the crew, and they were so thankful for it. And we were also able, because before Olivia, unfortunately had to back out, at a hotel, we had all the crew in a hotel, and some people were sharing rooms, which is not a big deal. I mean, people, most people are okay to do that. But if you ask people, would you like your own room? 9 times out of 10, people are like, oh yeah, I'd like my own room, my own space, all that kind of stuff, right? And unless it's, you're with a spouse or something like that. But another way was we reinvested, and we were able to give everybody their own rooms. And they were like, oh, that's amazing. Like, I'm totally cool with sharing it with Bob, but I have my own room now. That's totally awesome, right? And that's very nice too. Like, after a long day on set, coming home, having a shower, decompressing, having your own space. That was another way, we were able to do it and stuff. And so, there are horror stories. I mean, even on the major Hollywood sets, I mean, there are, because you are dealing with, I mean, and I know this sounds like an overused cliche, but it really is true. It is amazing that any movie gets made, because you have a bunch of people who are working together. And that's why you'll often see a lot of crew, a lot of directors will work with the same DPs over again, or a lot of actors will work with the same directors, or the directors work with the same actors. It's not just because they're talented and they obviously they like their work, but it's also because they get along and they like each other and they know each other, and there isn't that learning curve of having to learn somebody's personality or all that kind of stuff. And when you're dealing with sets and actors and crew and there's so many different personalities all weaving in together, it's the office politics doesn't go away, and so you always hope that obviously you get to work with wonderful people and everybody gets along, but that isn't always the case. So yeah, there's definitely horror stories. I've only done 2 professional movies in my life, and thankfully both of those movies we had a great crew and everybody got along and yeah, they were just professional and on point, and it was great. But I have no doubt, continuing on in my filmmaking journey throughout my life, I'm sure there will be instances where people aren't getting along, or there's a budding of personalities, or whatever the case is. But you have to band together, and you got to do it for the larger good of the project, really, at the end of the day. And so yeah, it can be pretty crazy. It can be pretty crazy. Member chat comes in from Evil Monsterism. Thank you, buddy. He says, Dave, do you think Armageddon would have been better if it ended with a second asteroid coming to Earth in order to set up a sequel? Do I think Armageddon would have been better? No, I think it would have been worse. I think Armageddon is a great film. I mean, a great apocalyptic disaster movie from the 90s. It's a classic. I mean, in its genre, it's a classic. So no, I think, I know you're just farting around, but to set up a sequel, that would have been really funny. That would have been really funny, actually. That would have been really funny. Could you imagine? All right. Let me see here. Let me scroll back and says, Big Papa Must says, I can see it being shot well if Blumhouse did it, but please hire different writers. So tired of the cringe scripts. Well, many different writers work on many different Blumhouse projects, right? So I don't know what movies in particular you're referring to, but you may be referring to somebody like Scott Teems, who helped write Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends and The Exorcist Believer. So you hear the name Scott Teems and you might think, oh God. But look, there's many different writers that they will work with, but also they will work with a lot of the same writers as well, because they're contractually obligated to. They've signed, maybe there's been an agreement or a contract that's been signed that, you get to work on several films or whatever. Writers are contract players anyway, but for all intents and purposes. But to your point, the point is it's got to be a good story. So whoever that is, it's got to be coming from a place where people know the franchise, they know the mythology, they have a real good sense of the character of Jason, and where are you going to put it, right? What are we going to do first? Are we doing a remake? Are we going to tell the Pamela Voorhees story? Are we going to, is that what we're going to do? Are we just going to jump into Jason? Are we going to tell the story of Jason as a child? It's one of the things where, I'm very curious about this Crystal Lake series because, full disclosure, I don't know. I know that they want to bring Jason back to the big screen, and I get that because there's, money that could potentially be, a lot of money that could potentially be made. But I just don't really know. I kind of feel now maybe Freddy and Jason moving forward are best for the small screen. And it's only because we've exhausted everything there is in terms of big screen. I just don't, I'm not convinced that there can be a Friday the 13th film series in the 2020s that has longevity. I don't really know. Now, of course it can be done, but I feel almost like it's best suited for television because you have more time to develop and flesh things out, right? You can create a whole thing. like your first season could be 10 episodes and like 45 minutes each. I mean, that's like, what is that? 7.5, 8 hours, something like that. I mean, that's huge rather than just like a 90-minute movie. And so I know that these characters, they were first established on the big screen. That's where you make the boatloads of money. They want the box office dollars. They want to capitalize on the nostalgia. I get all that. I do. But from a story perspective, I don't know. Could we see, like, could you guys honestly see a future where, forget the first film, could you honestly see a future where there is a new Friday the 13th film franchise where that every movie's just good? You know, part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, I'm skeptical, man. I really, really am. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, look at Halloween, right? I mean, Halloween 18 was like, okay, not bad, not bad, not bad. And then Halloween Kills was divisive. And then Halloween Ends was really divisive. I mean, Jesus, they weren't even 2 movies in and they couldn't keep it together. I mean, do we really think that, you know, like, I just don't know. I sort of feel like maybe television is where it should be now, because there's time, there's really time to flesh things out but I know they're not going to do that, obviously. But let's just put it this way. It wouldn't surprise me, even if it wasn't Blumhouse, even if it was like A24, which doesn't, Friday the 13th, I know they're doing the series, but the Friday the 13th as we know it doesn't feel very A24. So, but I don't care who it is, whether it's Paramount or New Line or A24 or Blumhouse. I mean, it would not surprise me if the Friday the 13th movie comes out and it's dog shit. It wouldn't surprise me. It would not surprise me. I don't know, man. I don't know. They got to get it right. They got to get it right. They've really got to get it right. They really got to get it right, folks. Let's see here. Flick Symmetry says, I think they need to turn to people like George Nicotero. Is that how you say that? I'm not familiar with him. Who can tell a great story and has the directing chops as well. George Nicotero. Maybe I know some of the movies he's done. But I can't think of, I'm not familiar with the name. Evil Alex says, I would like to see Ty West Pamela prequel film in style of Pearl. That film was great and good dive into the psyche of the female villain. Well, see, here we go, right? So now when you look at that, okay, would that make a great film, a Friday the 13th film, or would it be better served as a series? Right? That's kind of my point. Like, I almost feel like if you're going to make it a film, you've got to rush into Jason Vorhees, because that's what people want to see. They want to see Jason Vorhees right away. Like, I've been a huge proponent, and I've been a huge proponent of this for years now. And if you followed me for any length of time, you know I've been preaching about this for years. And I get a lot of pushback. But I think I would love to see a Pamela Voorhees story. Its intention is leading to Jason Voorhees, right? But like almost telling the first Friday the 13th again, but fleshing it out, right? Like really going back, introducing her earlier. Maybe we see her as the cook at the camp. You know, we see Jason as a little bit, like really fleshing that out. And really building on something so that when you do get to Jason Voorhees, it's like, whoa, like there's that feeling you have, and hopefully you'll know what I mean when I say this. At the end of Batman Begins, right? There's that moment when Batman turns over the card and it's a Joker card. I mean, everybody was like, oh, no, oh, you know what I'm saying? I mean, maybe some people weren't at that time, because at that time you would not have known that Heath Ledger's performance would have been so great. And you might have been like, oh, nobody can replace Jack Nicholson. I mean, maybe that was some of the reaction. I don't know. But looking at it now, it's like, well, you know, like almost like that kind of moment. Now, can you do that in a movie? Sure, you can, but I don't know if people would be receptive to a non-Jason Voorhees movie. And you don't want to crowd it all into one. Like, that's one of the things I didn't really like about the 2009 movie, where they open and they crowd it all into one. And but they feel they have to do that because people are coming back for Jason. It's the mask, it's the hockey mask. That's what people want to see. And I don't think doing it in film format affords you that time. Maybe it does. Again, I mean, I'm not a huge Friday the 13th expert. I know enough about it to talk about it here on the channel, of course. But there's obviously a lot of people out there that are far more neck deep into it than I am. But I feel like if you were to do a series, kind of like what they're doing with Crystal Lake in a lot of ways, I mean, that's basically what they're doing. I often wonder, maybe that should just be it. Like, I mean, let's just put it this way. If the Crystal Lake series is so good, it's so well done, and I'm not saying it's going to be, but if the Crystal Lake series is really good, like really good, where you're like, this is fucking really good, you might not give a shit about a film franchise. Like, sure, you want to see your favorite horror character on the big screen, so he feels larger than life and how you remember it from, 40 years ago. Okay, fine, I get that. And obviously, the studios and the production companies, that's where they want it because of the money. I totally get it from a business perspective. But from the audience perspective, if the story's not there and the story's just, I get seeing kills and blood and guts on a big screen and the sound. I get the experience, the entertainment experience of it. I totally get, but I don't know, man. I like, from a story perspective and taking your time and fleshing out the universe, and maybe the future of Friday the 13th and even A Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger really is streaming, because that's something too about Freddy that, I don't understand. People, no, it's got to be Robert. Okay, well, let's say Robert and Nancy come back. Or, I mean, Heather obviously is a bit younger, but so let's say Robert Englund comes back. He's not coming back for 5 movies, folks. He's got, and this is him saying this. This is not me saying this, so don't shoot the messenger here. He says, I've got arthritis. I'm a little more rounder than I used to be, right? Meaning he's got he's got a belly now. I'm older. I'm stiffer. I'm more tired. I don't like, I'm, you know what I'm saying? Sure, he can put on the makeup and cosplay at a convention for photos, but, putting that fucking slab on, and I have experience with it, so I know, putting that slab on, for 4 hours or 5 hours every day in a makeup chair for 6 to 8 weeks, I mean, he's 75 or 4 or whatever he is. Whatever he is. Hey, Google, how old is Robert Englund? 76. He's 76. He's probably 77 this year. He's 77 this year. He's 3 years away from 80. What's your end game for all of you who want Robert Englund to come back? I understand the nostalgia. He's Freddy. I totally get that. I understand that. But what's your end game? What's your end game, right? Just to come back for one movie? A lot of you will probably just say yes. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so that's not what they want. They want longevity, right? That's what every studio and production company, when they take on Friday the 13th or Halloween or A Nightmare on Elm Street, right? They want multiple films. Now, that doesn't mean 10 movies necessarily, but they hope that the first one does so well that they can make more, right? And that's what it's about. And so I just kind of think now, and maybe it's just because I'm older and, I'm sort of past, like I've been there, done that. And I'm not saying I'm any better than you. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that I'm just speaking from my own perspective that there's only so much of the same thing I can watch over and over and over again. And, I can watch all the old shit I grew up with over and over again because I grew up with it and it's nostalgic for me. But I don't think I can watch a run-of-the-mill, one-dimensional Friday the 13th movie that just spawns a bunch of copycat sequels like that. Like, that's not what they want. There's no way that can be the game plan going into this. You just can't do it. It's a very different world. The attention span of the audience is very different. The audience is very different. I mean, let's be honest. The people you're really appealing to, I mean, yes, there's some younger people that like it because they got into it because of their parents or whatever, sure. But at the end of the day, the root core you're targeting is males over 40. Right? And or at least over 35. And that's really sort of where, your target audience is. But you want to get all the younger people in there as well. And so maybe it'll be a Friday the 13th starring Taylor Swift or something. I don't know. It can be tricky though. Okay, I just want to make sure I've got all the super chats. I'm not missing anything. Yes. Okay, good. Just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. Tyler Adams says, getting 8 to 10 hours in a series every year instead of 2 hours of story every 1 to 1.5 years. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it would be 8 hours every year, but certainly, it would depend. I mean, the production schedules may be the same or similar, but you're just getting more. I mean, you're just getting more. And that doesn't mean the series would be good. It doesn't mean that. But imagine a 90-minute Stranger Things movie. I mean, it doesn't mean it can't be good, but now think of the Stranger Things series and all the nuance and all the character development and the things you can flesh out. And I know Friday the 13th is not to be taken that seriously. I mean, it's just as a lot of people say, it's kids running around a camp with big boobs having sex and getting killed. And I get it, but it's not 1980 anymore. It's not the 80s anymore. That flew in the 80s because that's just what horror generally was. Slasher movie. I mean, it's just, you know what I'm saying? But now with so many different options, that's just not going to cut it. I don't believe that's going to cut it. I really don't. That doesn't mean you can't do, like, as I said earlier, you can't do the first one like that. Well, sure, because the first one you're going to bring in all the people are going to go because of the nostalgia. They're going to go because Jason's back and they want to see him on the big screen, and they're going to go with their friends and Friday the 13th's back. Yeah, it's an illusion. You almost can't count that, right? Of course it's going to make boatloads of money because it's the first one. But do you honestly think that a Friday the 13th 1 through 5, let's say, or 1 through 4, the final chapter, do you honestly think that you could make 4 or 5 movies like that today and theatrically release them, and have them just make boatloads of money? I don't think so. I really don't. You need, again, not necessarily for us who grew up with them, but I mean, for the general movie going audience, I don't think so. And you have an opportunity here, right? You have an opportunity to make it different and to elevate it a bit. I don't mean elevate it into snobby, pretentious territory. I just mean elevate it to adding a bit of a different dynamic to it. And I'm really curious to see where this Crystal Lake series is going to go. I really am, because it's a series. It's a prequel series. Which tells me that maybe they're not going to rush into Jason, or maybe they have Jason, but he's a little kid. So you're getting your Jason fix. Okay, you're not getting your adult zombie Jason hockey mask. Okay? No, you're not getting adult zombie hockey mask wearing Jason. Okay, maybe you're not getting him for the first season. Maybe not. But you're getting little boy Jason, and you're watching him as a little boy, and you're learning about all the bullying he experienced. So you can, empathize with him, and then, he almost be, you almost feel sorry for him, and then his mother, and the dynamic, between his mother and his father, and the town of Crystal Lake, and how his mother got the job at the camp as the cook, and then how he ended up as a kid at the camp, and then his friends, or were there any preconceived notions that he would end up this way, or his mother, who's his mother? Is she a functioning psychotic? What's her story? What's her background? So you do but it's so well told. It's so interesting and fascinating, and the writing is so good, and the story is so great, and they flesh out things so well that you don't care. You don't care that you're not watching zombie hockey mask wearing Jason tear open to some chick with big boobs. You don't care. You literally don't give a fuck, because the writing is so good. You're so emotionally invested in the story, and you know that's where it's leading. You know it's leading there, right? You know that. Like, but I don't think you can do that in feature film form because there isn't the patience for it, right? The audience doesn't, we need to get to Jason right away. Not necessarily with a series. So, I don't know. It's interesting. Metal Drummer 91 says, I think they should do a direct sequel to Final Chapter and bring back Corey Feldman as Tommy Jarvis and erase the other sequels like Halloween 2018 did. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But I definitely know that the fan in you would definitely like to see that. No, that's not going to happen. But again, right, that's to my point. You want to see that because of the nostalgia, because you want Jason and Tommy and you want to see Corey Feldman and it's like a what if thing. I mean, maybe, like I really think those ideas like Halloween 4 Part 2 or, doing a direct sequel to Friday the 13th Part 4 and bringing back Corey Feldman. I think you could do that stuff, but not in feature film format. And not as a series, I think you could, I think the risks are too high to do it as a feature film, a theatrically released feature film. I think the risks are lower if you potentially do it as a series, but make it an anthology series. Like maybe they should make a what if horror anthology series. So they lean into it, exactly what it is. They're not trying to make it out to be anything other than what it actually is. And it's an anthology. It's a what if anthology horror series. The first season is Halloween 4 Part 2. They take it seriously, right? I'm not saying they make fun of it and it's a spoof. They take it seriously, but it's a what if, And then they do the same thing with Friday the 13th. That's season 2. Season 2 is 4 episodes. Corey Feldman's back. It's Friday the 13th, Part 4, Part 2, or I don't know, they do that with Elm Street, right? They do a direct sequel to Elm Street 3. So they pretend that, 4, 5, and 6 didn't happen. And, Nancy, I don't know. Or maybe they just do a direct sequel to Part 1 and they pretend 2 through New Nightmare didn't happen. And that's season 3. Season 3 is, and you bring back Robert Englund and you do it that way. And that is, it's, and it's not like epic. It's like a 3 to 4 part miniseries. It's like Midnight Mass. Do you know what I mean? It's not like, like 10 episodes, where it's like, an hour long. No. It's just, it is the true definition of a miniseries. So the first season is Halloween 4 Part 2 with Danielle Harris. It's like 3 or 4 episodes, half hour each. You do that with, Friday and Corey Feldman, 3 or 4 episodes, half hour each. So maybe it's like 2 hours, total. And you do it with, Elm Street as well. I was going to say something else. I had 2 things on my mind there. You do it with Elm Street as well. It's almost like an, Outer Limits or like a Creep Show kind of anthology series, but it's a what if thing for the horror, for some of the old school slasher horror stuff. And like that I could see because they lean into it and it's marketed that way. That is the series. The series is horror. What if, and it's just that, and it's just fun. And that's really cool. And then it fills a bit of a void. It fills a bit of a hole. But they don't try to make it out to be anything than what it is and take it any more seriously than they need to. And they certainly are not going to theatrically release that and spend millions of dollars. It's just not going to happen. You will never see a Halloween 4 Part 2 theatrically released. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say you'll never see a Halloween 4 Part 2. because, you never say never. I think it's possible down the road, maybe you see some sort of, like I said, I don't know, maybe a one-off special. It's a 90-minute one-off special that Malick decides to do, and he releases it online at Halloween time. You know what I mean? Like, you never say never. There's so many different things, a 2-3 part miniseries, like, who knows? You never say never, but you're not going to see that theatrically. Like, no way. It's not going to happen. No, I do not believe so anyway. Matt Rayner sends in a very generous super chat of $27.99 Canadian shekels. Thank you, Matt. Says, if Robert was to do anything Nightmare related now, I could see him doing a voiceover as Freddy for an animated Nightmare movie. Or if there is a Nightmare prequel series, he could do some sort of voiceover narration. Yeah, he could do that. Certainly, yeah, I could see him maybe doing something with an animated series. But then, Matt, the question, becomes, does he want to? Again, like, although Freddy is what he is most known for, and he will always be known for Freddy, it's his, claim to fame at the end of the day, even though he's done a bunch of other things. We always have to remember that the actors, generally speaking, that doesn't mean there isn't some actor out there that is just as crazy over their part as their fans. But generally speaking, the actors are not into it like the fans are. And because, and it makes perfect sense. It's not for the actors. The actors love performing because they love being a part of stories, and they love playing different characters. And, and if their career takes them to huge success, that's great because they get paid well and they love doing what they do. But they're not emotionally invested into the role like a lot of the fans are. And that is why you always see fans know so much more about the characters in the movies than the actors ever do. And I'm sure you've, seen this where, during like a Q&A at a con or something, some actor will ask something, and they're very passionate about it and excited about it. And then the actor just can't remember, or they just don't know, or they're just like, I think, because they're not thinking about it every day. They're not, very few actors. If you asked Robert Englund, when was the last time you watched, I don't know, part 3 or part 2 or something, he'd probably say, oh God, I don't know, years ago. When was the last time Mark Hamill sat down and watched, The Empire Strikes Back? Maybe it was a few years ago in prep for The Last Jedi. I don't know. But generally, he'd probably go, oh, God, I don't know. I've seen bits and pieces of it on TV from time to time, but like in its entirety, I actually sat down and watched it, I don't know, 30 years ago. That's just the way it is, because they're not, and again, not every, I'm speaking obviously generally, but so with Robert, it's like, yeah, he could do it, but does he want to do it? Does he have any interest in doing it? He might be like, no, I'm good. Because I also don't think he needs to do the voice either. You don't need, like, there are people that say, well, hire another actor and get Robert to do the voice. You don't need him to do the voice. You don't need him to do that. And again, I'm not trying to sound, or I'm not trying to toot my own horn when I say this, but I think when you look at what I was able to do with Dylan's New Nightmare, one of the compliments I got was the voice is great. It's not Robert, of course, but it's Freddy. And you put it together with the look and the mannerisms and the character and the voice, and it was, not everybody liked my Freddy, but overall, a lot of people did, and there's reasons for that. And I'm not saying that I have to be the next Freddy. I'm just saying that what I was able to show should prove to a lot of people that there are other actors out there that can do it, whatever they need to do. And so I don't think you need to have him do the voice at all. If anything, what I think would be interesting is if there was if the Nightmare series did move in a direction like what Dylan's New Nightmare has done. And I'm not just saying this because I was a part of Dylan's New Nightmare. I'm saying this because I actually think there is some real validity to this. Now, again, a studio and a production company and even the Craven estate may not want to move in this direction because they may want to actually bring Freddy back, like not make it meta, not make it, self-aware, make it just a full-on lived-in real, narrative. It's more likely that that's what they're going to want to do. But I'm telling you, man, the direction that Dylan's New Nightmare was moving, and again, Dylan's New Nightmare is just the first part of a larger thing. There's so much potential there. And you could bring Robert Englund back into that story. Because remember, Robert Englund, we don't know what happened to him. When we saw him in Wes Craven's New Nightmare, he didn't die. So he's still out there. You could bring him back into that fold. And then you could have Robert Englund face Freddy. I mean, that's fascinating. That's interesting right there. Almost like a passing of the torch in some sort of symbolic way. Like, that's interesting to me. That's really cool. So there's a lot to play with there. Robert doesn't have to come back and be Freddy. I know he's synonymous, and I understand that. I really, really do. But I think it's important to remember that there are other actors out there. I do not subscribe, and maybe it's because I am an actor and I know this, but I have never subscribed to the idea that there is only one actor that can ever play a part well and do it justice. That is not the same in saying that this actor will always be this character for me. Harrison Ford will always be Han Solo and Indiana Jones for me because I grew up with, he was the first to do it, and I grew up with him. He's my favorite actor, but that aside, even if he wasn't, I grew up with him as Han Solo and Indiana Jones. So he will always be that to me, and I will always have that. But I am not naive enough to think that there is no actor on the face of the planet ever and ever again in the history of recorded time that could ever put on the fedora and do a great job as Indiana Jones in all the ways that Harrison Ford did. The sly, the handsome, the debonair, the rough, the adventure. Of course there is. And I'm not talking about Chris Pratt, because I know there are a lot of people that wanted him to do it. And I'm just speaking in, like, I said this, I think he might be a little too old now because he's hitting his mid-50s, I think. They'll probably want to go younger if they were to reboot Indiana Jones. But I always used to think that Hugh Jackman would have made a great Indiana Jones. He's tall, he's handsome, he put on the fedora. Like, I could totally see that. Now, does that mean that he's suddenly going to replace Harrison Ford for me? No. It just means that he's got the look and the chops and the style and the presence and he's got that Indiana Jones thing. Like, he could probably do it. I don't know, but I'm not naive enough to think that nobody in the face of the planet could ever be Indiana Jones ever again. That makes no sense. That makes no sense, right? People thought nobody on the face of the planet could ever do justice like, Heath Ledger did. And along comes Joaquin Phoenix, right? Now, it's a different Joker. It's not the same Joker, but Joaquin Phoenix, and it's not the same kind of film, but Joaquin Phoenix's Joker is very much Joker and is every bit as good as Heath Ledger's. They're just different. They're in two different, you know what I mean? So I don't subscribe to that. I really don't. It would be like saying nobody could ever do Daffy Duck's voice because, Mel Blanc is dead. Well, and along comes Eric Bauza and, a slew of others that have done his voice. So it's just not true. What is happening is fans, what they are, and I totally get it. I do understand it. They speak from an emotional, nostalgic place, right? They just can't imagine. It's too big for them. No, I don't know it. No, I don't want to imagine anybody. No, it's Robert and it's only Robert. But you have Robert Englund, like, even despite the fact that I disagree with Robert in suggesting Kevin Bacon, even Robert Englund is smart enough to know that there's somebody else out there that can do it. Robert Englund liked Jackie Earle Haley. He thought the movie didn't do him justice, and I agree on that. But even Robert said the problem wasn't Jackie, right? And so, yeah, it's interesting, Matt. Like, it really is. And I get what you're saying, though. I get what you're saying. And I like your way of thinking. I like how you're thinking and where you're going with it. Because and I get it. I get it. But I just think that in order for the Elm Street franchise to survive with any sort of longevity, Elm Street fans really have to start accepting that Robert is done. Now, that doesn't mean that next week they're not going to announce, hey, Robert Englund. I mean, who knows, right? Money talk, who knows? But longevity, I just don't see it. He's older. he doesn't quite look the same anymore. I mean, look at how he looked in the Goldbergs, right? You know what I mean? It just didn't quite, do you know, it's Freddy, but I don't know. I don't want to, like, sometimes it's okay to say, and listen, if you truly do not want another Elm Street film, right? Because there are fans that do that. There are fans that say, I don't want another Elm Street film. No, Robert is done. If Robert's done, it's over. You know, it's like when the drummer for Led Zeppelin died, it's done. They didn't go get another drummer, it's done. But then you look at the other side of the coin and you go, well, hey, there's AC/DC. Bon Scott, legendary. Bon Scott's amazing. I mean, Bon Scott, and you do have your Bon Scott purists out there that nobody, Bon Scott, he's the only, I totally get it. I understand it. He dies, but then along comes Brian Johnson. Now, Brian Johnson sounds very different than Bon Scott, and I can listen to a Bon Scott song and I'm like, yeah, like the original Highway to Hell. I'm like, yeah, na na na, na na na, na na na, na. You know, and it goes, highway. It sounds great. It sounds great, right? But then you listen to Thunderstruck and you're like, ooh, sounds just as good, but it's different. It's different, right? It's different. It's not the same singer, right? It's different, but it's just as fucking electric, right? And so, you know, there are others. There are others that can do it. And if you are somebody that just thinks, listen, I don't want them to make another one at all, ever. If there's no Robert, then no Elm Street ever. But that's not really the case. You do have a lot of people that say, I don't want Robert, but I want another Elm Street. But I don't want Robert, but I want another Elm Street. But I don't want Robert, but I want... You have that dichotomy as well. You have a lot of people doing that. It's like, okay, well, you have to understand then that if you want another Elm Street, you're going to have to accept another actor. And hopefully, you know, again, not everybody liked my portrayal of Freddy, but hopefully my portrayal of Freddy, and again, it was very tiny. It's not like I was, you know, on screen for very much because it's a very short film and it was a very tiny sample size. But hopefully that's a good example of, hey, because even diehards were like, it was pretty good. You know what I mean? They were kind of like, it was pretty good. Cecil Laird had a guy come up to him at the premiere in Phoenix and say, I'm a diehard Robert fan. I'm a Robert only guy. I'm a Robert or nobody guy. He said this to Cecil. Cecil didn't know him. He just came up to him after the premiere. I think I was busy getting photos done with Miko and Vince, but he came up to him. Actually, he might have been in the line to get a photo done. That's probably why he talked to him. But he said, I'm a Robert or nobody guy. But he said, but I have to admit, that was pretty good. You know, and so, like, again, right? He doesn't have to love me. He doesn't have to think I'm amazing. He doesn't have to be like, oh my God. But even he was like, huh, that was pretty good. That was pretty good. That showed him that it's possible, right? And so hopefully my performance was able to do that. It doesn't have to be me. I'm not advocating for it to be me. I'm simply saying that at least that's an example that it can be done, that somebody else can do it and do it justice and do it well. And so, yeah, anyways, I'm going off on a tangent here, but it's a good topic that you bring up, Matt, because I know there are a lot of people that feel that they would like Robert's voice to be there. Well, if he can't be it, maybe it can be his voice. And maybe, but I would not say, here's what I would say. If you want to do an animated series and Robert wants to come back and do his voice, sure. Great. That would be probably a cute little shtick for Robert. You could even set him up with his own home studio. He wouldn't even have to travel. You could bring him in through, you know, Source Connect or ISDN, and you can set him up with a little booth and you can get him going and he could record all his lines, take direction right from his home studio, like I do. Or he could travel into the studio if he wanted to, but animated, sure. Having his voice there as a feature film, no. I say you let the actor do it. You let the actor do it. You let the actor embody, especially if the actor can do it. Yeah, but it's interesting though. It is interesting. I will say that. Okay. Did I miss any other super chats? Hang on a sec. Oh, here's one here from Jason Stillwell. Sends in $5. Thank you, Jason. Says, I think Elm Street should be an origin story with 3 to 5 seasons before Freddy is murdered, which lead into a new movie series. Yeah. So, okay. So I'm with you there up until leading into a new movie series. I know it's been done before in the superhero subgenre, leading into a movie series. Yeah, I say you just make it a series. I don't think it's necessary to then move it to movies. I really don't. I think just make it a series. Make it a dark series. You know what I mean? And maybe you get, like, I don't know if I would go 3 to 5 seasons. But again, but to your point, like, you know, you can do a backstory with that. Flesh it out. Let's learn about, you know, Springwood and you know, which, by the way, was not revealed until Elm Street 2. Did you guys know that? I don't know if you knew that or not, but I think that's why in the original Elm Street, at Tina's funeral, there's shots of palm trees, right? And you see palm trees quite a bit in the original Elm Street. And people kind of make fun of that. They're like, well, it doesn't make any sense. It's supposed to be Springwood, Ohio. And it's like, well, actually, I don't know where specifically Elm Street 1 is supposed to take place. Craven may have left it ambiguous on purpose, just so it kind of appealed to just kind of, you know, middle Americana kind of thing. Because, you know, every town has an Elm Street, which is totally true. Every town, every city does have an Elm Street. It's like King Street or Queen Street. Well, I don't know about in the States, but certainly here in Canada, we have a King Street and a Queen Street in almost every city or town. So it's kind of like that. But it was Elm Street 2 where Springwood, Ohio actually first made its, I think it was Elm Street 2. It was 2 or 3, but I think it was 2, where it finally sort of made an appearance. So it wasn't a mistake in Elm Street 1 that you see palm trees in the background, because Craven never thought that, I don't think Craven ever thought that it was taking place in Ohio. I thought it might have just been supposed to be California, you know, but they just didn't make a specific mention. I think I stand to be corrected, but I believe that is true. I believe that is true, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 1 or 2 or something like that. But yeah, like, you know, there's lots to ponder on and think about, and it's fascinating stuff. It is interesting. All right. So I've got all the super chats, right? Did I miss any? I just want to make sure I did not miss any. Jason Stillwell was the last one. Good. Okay. Bring that up. Scroll down here. What do we got going on? Let me see here. Ellie Cat says, I was firmly in the nobody but Robert Englund camp, but your excellent portrayal opened my eyes and gives me hope for the future of the franchise. Well, thank you, Ellie. I really appreciate that. That's really cool. And listen, I understand it, right? Like, I mean, it's Robert Englund. He's the GOAT. He is a, you know, he's a modern day Vincent Price. He's a horror legend. The Freddy Krueger character is one of the most iconic characters in the history of cinema. And he's the only one to have ever portrayed it. I mean, outside of Jackie Earle Haley, of course, but he's the GOAT. He's the Inception. Yes, of course. And of course, it's far more difficult to replace Robert than it would be a Michael Myers or a Jason, because he was so animated. It was his voice, it was his body language, it was his stature. But it can be done. Because we also have to remember too, there isn't a gigantic pool to pull from. I mean, I also don't think it's fair to use Jackie Earle Haley in the Elm Street remake as the litmus test. I mean, we don't really have a large pool to draw from. I understand that the, Elm Street remake is the only thing we can draw from, but hopefully, and I know that Dylan's New Nightmare hasn't exactly been seen by millions of people, but hopefully, because it is the closest to the real thing that we've gotten since, right? Again, when you look at all the work that went into the production and who was hired, and you got Miko Hughes back, and you had Ron Sloan in there, and then Nora Hewitt was doing all the makeup, and Mikey Rotella did the sculpt. Mikey Rotella, for those of you that don't know, did sculpting work on, some of the Predator movies, and, he was also, he helped sculpt the creature at the end of Smile, the horror movie Smile, and so, we had him that sculpted my Freddy look, and so I mean and of course there I am in the makeup chair for 4 hours every day getting it plastered on and doing it like they did way back in the 80s. I mean, you can't get to the real thing. Like, this is as close to the real thing as you can get without it being the real thing, right? So that's why I say that. So I appreciate you saying that, and that means a lot. And again, I'm not naive to think that everybody liked it. Not everybody did. Not everybody liked the movie. Not everybody liked me as Freddy. But there was an overwhelming positive lean and slant to my portrayal. And hopefully, like I said, it at least shows people that it can be done. Whether it's me or Bob Schlabberwabber or Dan Schluga, whoever, I don't know, whoever ends up donning the glove, for some sort of official release. Hopefully it is the right person and they do their due diligence and they cast correctly. But it can be done. But it also depends, Ellie, on the direction they want to go with, right? I mean, my Freddy Krueger was very much a Robert Englund essence and in the spirit of Robert Englund's Freddy, because I am playing the demon or the entity formerly known as, but I am playing like that is the entity in Wes Craven's New Nightmare is, although he looks a bit different than he did obviously in the films prior to that, it's still Robert Englund, and it's in the spirit of the Freddy that, we know and love. So my Freddy is very much a Robert Englund-ish Freddy canonically. Like it has to be, because it wouldn't make sense otherwise not to be. So that was the creative direction that we went into for that. But you could have, when you look at the Elm Street remake, again, Jackie Earle Haley, although it was a bit jarring because we're so used to seeing, a different style of makeup, Jackie Earle Haley, at the end of the day, overall, at the end of the day, wasn't the glaring problem of that movie. There were other issues of that movie and why it didn't resonate. So it really depends. Like, when they do finally reboot Elm Street, what's the direction they're going to want to go in? They may hire a great actor, but it may, and he may do a fantastic job, but it just might not be the Freddy that you expect because they've decided to do a bit of a different, so they don't compare. So people don't compare it to who knows, right? Who knows what they're going to do? But I appreciate you saying that very much. It means a lot. Lee the Machine Bowers. Lee, what's going on? Great to see you here, Lee. Sends in a very generous super chat of $19.99. Thank you, Lee. And says, Dave, my man, happy Monday. Give us a Friday the 13th TV series. Well, you're getting one from A24 and Peacock. It's called Crystal Lake. But keep Blumhouse away from Friday the 13th rights and keep them away from Freddy rights too. Don't want them ruining them both. Well, listen, Lee, you're not the only one. You're not the only one. I'm actually open to it. I'm open to it because of James Wan and his production company, Atomic Monsters. So I am open to the idea, especially if James Wan is involved and sort of spearheading that in that direction. And, again, we have to be, I know that Blumhouse tends to get a bit of a bad rap from some horror fans because they do release some stinkers, but they do release some really good movies too. And so, I think if it was just Blumhouse and the team that brought us the Halloween films, and again, I don't mean that on a personal level or anything like that. I just mean that I wasn't crazy on the recent Halloween trilogy. So it wouldn't necessarily excite me if that was the same team that was doing the Friday the 13th films. But, and again, it's a pipe dream right now. There's no evidence to suggest that Blumhouse is actually going to do this. But James Wan and his production company are very excited. They've merged. They have a partnership with Blumhouse. And I don't know. If James Wan was going to direct, that would even make it more interesting. But like I said at the top of the show today, there's no evidence to suggest that he's going to do that. His production company can help spearhead it and him not be directing. So we don't know if he's going to direct. It might be somebody completely different. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate the super chat. Trevor Bristow says, hey, Dave, are you excited for Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire? Not really. Not really. I've said this before. I'm not particularly... I mean, I will watch it when it comes to streaming. I'm not going to go to the theater to see it. I'm disappointed, and I've said this before on past shows, I'm disappointed in the direction of the Monsterverse, although I guess it makes sense that maybe it's the only direction you can go in because you can't take yourself too seriously, but it just looks like a video game to me. It just looks cheesy, absolute bonkers nonsense. And if that appeals to you, that's great. But that's what I don't like about the Godzilla franchise, from the 60s and the 70s are the humorous, silly movies where Godzilla is using his atomic breath to fly through the air, or he's using his tail to slide across. There's a lot of real cheesy, and listen, you can absolutely watch them, but there's a lot of real cheesy nonsense. I like Godzilla when it's taken seriously. So going back to the 1954 original Godzilla, or the 1956 American version of that original with Raymond Burr, or going to the 1984 Godzilla, the return of Godzilla, or my favorite Godzilla movie of all time, which is the American version of the Godzilla 1984 movie called Godzilla 1985 with Raymond Burr in there. He's taken seriously. Watch Godzilla 1985. It's actually... it's dated now, but I still think that suit is one of the best Godzilla suits ever. I think there's moments where he looks absolutely authentic and real. The photography is brilliant, and he's taken seriously. It's not dumb and silly. He's taken seriously. And although I wasn't a huge fan of the 2014 Godzilla, because I think there were certain things about it that, I appreciated that they were at least trying to take it seriously. Look at Godzilla 2014 and now look at Godzilla X Kong. It looks like a PS5 video game. And that's not a knock on Adam Wingard. It's just creatively, I just don't agree with the creative direction. I just kind of watch the trailer and I'm it looks too silly to me. It just looks bonkers silly. And that's just not what I want. I want it serious. I want fucking serious. I think the best one, and I will stand by this, I think the best Monsterverse movie in this new Monsterverse franchise that started with Godzilla in 2014 and then went to Kong Skull Island. I think the best movie, which is kind of a nice balance of both, although it leans a little silly, but no, I wouldn't even say silly. I would say maybe a little more kind of self-aware. But I think the best Godzilla movie in this new Godzilla monster universe right now is still 2019's Godzilla King of the Monsters. It's my favorite. Again, I don't think it's the greatest movie of all time, but I think it's one of my favorite Godzilla movies of all time. I think it's a great Godzilla movie. And going up against King Ghidorah, or King Ghidorah, as it's known in North America, but going up against King Ghidorah and then and then Mothra in there, and it was so, and then Ronan and the it was just so the symbolism when he's on the volcano or whatever, the mountain. Oh my God. The photography's great. Godzilla's great. It's a nice balance between action and the human characters. It's still my favorite. Yeah. Godzilla versus Kong, I thought was hilarious from the beginning because I'm like, okay, Godzilla, that's like me going up against a 3-year-old. It's they actually had to make Kong huge in order to make the movie make sense. Godzilla is nuclear. He breathes atomic fire. And so it only makes sense that Godzilla won that fight, which obviously he did. But they did give Kong his due, though. They did give Kong his due. Kong, kind of helped save Godzilla. And that was but just the two of them standing on an aircraft carrier is like, what? Like, it's just not like the like, I don't know. I get it, but Dave, it's just supposed to be fun. I know it's fun. It just feels like now it's like, hey, like what's like the MonsterVerse has gone fast and furious. The MonsterVerse has gone fast and furious. Like Godzilla King of the Monsters was that nice balance. You know, it was like Fast 5, you know? Do you remember Fast 5 when it came out in 2011? That first one that had The Rock in it. Remember Fast 5? You know, it was a little kind of silly, like kind of over the top, but still kind of plausible. And you're like, no, this is good. This is Fast 5 was good. It was good. That's Godzilla King of the Monsters. You know what I mean? It's good. That was good. Now, like Godzilla X Kong is like Fast 9 or Fast 10. You know, like they're going to space now. It's just like, yeah, I'm out. I'll watch it at home on a Sunday afternoon. Sure. When it comes to Netflix or whatever, and I don't have to, you know, sure. I'll watch it because I'll see how, you know, but I'm just like, yeah, it just, the trailers, I watch the trailers and I'm like, this just looks too silly. And there's no scale. Godzilla and Kong running beside each other. It's like they look too, like, these are, it just looks too silly. Just to me. And that's not a knock on, like I said, the director or it's just the creative direction. I'm just like, it's just not for me. It's not for me. I mean, it'll probably be great for what it is, like a great, silly, animated, wild, crazy. Sure, it'll probably be great. You know, very entertaining, very fun, lots of special effects and craziness. And sure, that's not what I want for my Godzilla now. That's me though. Excuse me. All right, let me just see. Did I get all the super chats? Lee sent one in. I got Lee's. I think Lee was the last one. Yep. Okay, good. Want to make sure. Yes, Oliver Mercer says Godzilla -1. Back to the, yeah, I still got to see that. I still, for those of you that may not know, I still have, or are wondering, I still have not seen Godzilla -1. I have to see it. Fliximetry says Black Sabbath, Pink Floyd, VH, then pepper that with The Cure, U2, The Cult, and you have my 70s, 80s era music choices growing up. Very cool. Very cool. A lot of good bands in there for sure. Fliximetry follows up, says, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That is true. But that's where it is now, right? You know what I mean? And I see a lot of people like losing their minds over the Godzilla X Kong. I'm just like, what? Like Kong's got like the Power Glove from Nintendo on his fucking arm. What is going on? You know? And I'm just like, but I guess that's what you do, right? That's probably the notes coming from the studios and what, you know, we need to make it bigger and badder. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse when I say this, but go watch. I wish I could show it here without getting dinged, but obviously I can't. Go watch just YouTube after the show. When you think of it, when you have time, go to YouTube and type in Godzilla, or to be precise, Godzilla 2014, right? You may just be able to put in Godzilla, but type in Godzilla Comic-Con trailer. Just do that. Godzilla Comic-Con trailer. It's from 2014 or 2013 maybe. Watch that trailer. And the tone of that trailer, the feeling you get when you watch it, that is what I want. That's what I want. Now, I know the more monsters you bring into a MonsterVerse, just having a bunch of titans and monsters seems kind of, you know, silly, I guess. But the tone of that Comic-Con trailer, do you guys remember that? Gareth Edwards says, Tyler, yeah, he directed that film. And I'm not really a big Gareth Edwards. I wasn't really crazy what he did with Rogue One. I wasn't really crazy what he did with Godzilla. Godzilla, again, I have it's take too much to get into here, but I do have my issues with it. But the tone of that trailer, you know, it's got the famous I become the destroyer of worlds speech from Oppenheimer, you hear him, you just see the scale they show in that trailer. I'm telling you, it's one of the best teaser trailers I've ever seen in my life. I'm not kidding. That's not hyperbolic. To me, the Comic-Con Godzilla trailer, don't type in just Godzilla teaser trailer. Don't do that because you'll get something else. Type in the Godzilla Comic-Con trailer. Let me see if I can actually just quickly, hang on a sec. 1 second. I'll just show you guys. I can't play it obviously, but, okay. Is that it? Yeah, that's it. So, hang on. Yeah, that's it. So when you think of it, go to this one right here. There it is. Godzilla 2014 Comic-Con teaser trailer. Like, even just look at that. Look at the scale of that. Look at this. It's one of the best teaser trailers I've ever seen in my life. The scale, and you hear Oppenheimer's speech over this. You get all sorts of, it's fucking wild. It's one of the best teaser trailers I've ever seen in my life. And the way it ends, and it's great. It's great. To this day. And the tone of that teaser, the feeling you get when you're watching it and you're seeing the scale and the destruction and the people, and you're hearing that speech and Oppenheimer's voice and everything, and then it cuts to this shot of the smoky sort of city, and you're kind of tracking up Godzilla's, back, and then you see his silhouette in the sunlight and the carnage, and he roars and just says Godzilla. It's fucking wild. When I saw that, I was like, oh, I was so excited. It felt serious. It felt like, yeah, yes. Then watch the Godzilla X Kong trailer. What happened? I don't know, but that fucking trailer is one of the best teaser trailers I've ever seen, still to this day. Dylan says, Dave, are you a fan of Dune? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the new movie. It's one of the best action sci-fi films ever. I'm not a fan of Dune, but admittedly, I haven't seen the original Dune from the 80s, and I have not seen the one from a couple of years ago. I do own it. I have the 4K. I just haven't had a chance to watch it. And so, no, I have not seen the new Dune that just came out, but I am a big fan of Denis Villeneuve. Obviously, he's a Canadian from Montreal, Quebec. And I like his movies. I mean, everything from, Sicario to Prisoners to Arrival. I mean, he's one of the best directors working right now. And so I definitely need to watch Dune, and I definitely need to watch Dune 2. I just haven't got around to doing it. Evil Alex says, Godzilla 2014 is a blue balls bore fest to me. Godzilla King of the Monsters is way better. I agree that Godzilla King of the Monsters is way better than Godzilla 2014. But here's the problem with Godzilla 2014, and I've talked about this. I actually don't think it's boring, but here's the problem. Gareth Edwards tried to implement, and I actually agree with this because it adds to the mystery and the mystique, and you don't want to peak too soon, right? It's known as the Jaws effect, even though the Jaws effect was not by accident, but they had to do this because the shark wasn't working. Steven Spielberg and people attached to that film have said, hey, listen, the shark broke down all the time. That's why you don't see it and you just see a fin or, the POV shots. We had to do that. And ironically, it worked in our favor to do that because it created more mystery and mystique, and it was scarier, right? That theater of the mind. That's what Gareth Edwards was wanting to do with Godzilla. I actually agree with that. I think that's interesting, and I think that's fascinating. The problem with Godzilla 2014 is not, in my opinion, now I haven't watched it in a few years, so I'll have to go back and watch it. But from what I remember, it's not that you don't see Godzilla a lot. It's that the human characters are not nearly as interesting and as dynamic and as three-dimensional as Roy Scheider's, Chief Brody and Hooper and Quint. And I mean, it didn't matter that the shark was not on the screen because the dynamic and the relationship and the acting and the performances between these characters was so compelling and so interesting. We didn't care. We didn't care. We did not care. And so if the human, like if Bryan Cranston had actually survived, but he died in the first 10 minutes of the movie, if the human element of Godzilla 2014 had been more compelling and interesting and fleshed out and more three-dimensional, it would not have mattered. It would not have mattered. It would not have mattered. Because eventually you're going to get to that point and you're going to see, because the shark in Jaws is only on screen in its entirety. This is true. You can look this up. You only see the shark in its entirety in the movie Jaws for 4 minutes. Total screen time, 4 minutes. And you don't see the shark in its, very clearly until like 80 minutes into the movie or something like that. You see glimpses of it, a fin, a bit of the side, you know what I'm saying, right? But I mean, actually see it until like 80 minutes. And do we care? Does anybody go, we don't see the shark enough? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You don't care. Do you care? Whenever you watch Jaws, are you sitting there going, when the fuck's the shark? You don't care because you're so invested in the human story. You're emotionally attached. You are one of them. You're into it. It's compelling, right? Godzilla didn't have that. Didn't have that. They were like 1.5 dimensional cookie cutter characters. And so that, for me, is largely why Godzilla 2014 had so much potential, but ultimately failed. Not failed, but just kind of, But Godzilla 2014, although the human characters are, I'm not comparing them to Jaws, they were still kind of cookie cutter, kind of 1.5 dimensional characters. What you did in Godzilla 2019, Godzilla King of the Monsters, is you brought the Godzilla up. So you had the human characters kind of, but you had to, if you're going to have 1.5 dimensional human characters, you cannot have hardly any monsters because the characters are not nearly as interesting to hold our attention, right? So what they did in the Godzilla King of the Monsters is they didn't really improve on the human characters. The human characters are still kind of 1.5 dimensional. They just brought the Godzilla and monster action up to match it. So that's why Godzilla 2019, Godzilla King of the Monsters, is far more fun and more interesting. But it still plays it pretty even. It's not bonkers ridiculous, right? Godzilla versus Kong is like, okay, now we're going into crazy territory. And then Godzilla X Kong just looks like a completely different universe than where we began. So that's how I feel about it anyway. That's how I feel about it. What's the time here? Okay, I got to get going in a few minutes here. I got to get going. Lee the Machine Bowers sends another $19.99. Thank you, Lee. Says there's a new TV spot of Godzilla X Kong. It shows Kong hitching a ride on Godzilla going to war. I'm like, nope, I don't like this. Hitching a ride? Really? He jumped like in the water. Oh, God, I got to watch it. Because it comes out soon. I got to watch it. Lee again, $9.99. This is Dave McRae signing off. Gail Weathers signing off. That's funny. Lunar Lad sends in $5, says there's a very good animated thriller series from 2004 called Monster. It has elements of Seven and Halloween. The English dub is hard to find though. Very cool. Thanks for suggesting that. I will definitely go and check that out, Lunar Lad. Thank you for recommending that. And then Andrew Rawlinson, sends in £5 and says, I guarantee when you watch -1, you will jump on and talk about it. It had a similar impact on me as Oppenheimer did, a profound monster movie. Well, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait. Looking forward to it. All right. I've got all the super chats. I believe we'll wrap this up here in a second. Let me just see. Edward Nito, my man, says, that's actually a great way to describe the Monsterverse, Dave. It does feel like it fits into the Fast and Furious universe. Yeah, it's just not for me, man. I just don't like the direction it was taken. I understand it, and maybe it was inevitable because how many serious monster movies can you do? I get it. But I just was like, it just feels... but you know what? Who knows? I'm not going to hate on it. Maybe I'll watch it and love it. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. Who knows? But I'm just not crazy on the direction. Just not crazy on the direction. Evil Monsterism says, Dave going to be on this rant until next year. Well, you know what? It's something, it's true. It's not that there isn't a lot of truth to what some of these channels say, but when you build your whole channel around it as an identity, are we really receiving an authentic truth from the viewer or from the host? I don't know. I mean, let's put it this way. You know, being all these channels that hate on it, they're not going to make any money saying that they're excited for the Ray film, right? I don't know. More people need to talk about what they love instead of what they hate. Evil Alex says, now I want you to do a parody hate channel video with you where you have red eyes on the thumbnail. Yeah, I should do that. And listen, you guys know me. There's a lot of things I don't like, and there's a lot of things that I've ranted about, but I can't imagine making that the identity of the channel. And listen, they do what they do, and I've watched a few of those channels, and there's a lot of stuff they say, and I'm like, I agree with that. But I never can get behind something like, oh, there's going to be a new fucking such and such movie. I'm going to make 900 videos hating on it and telling you why it's going to suck before the movie even comes out. You know, like I always try to be more nuanced. And if I'm not crazy on something, you know, I'll be like, I don't know, you know, like I could even say that about the Ray film, right? I'm like, oh, they really fucked up the sequel trilogy, and they did. It's like, you know, again, don't misinterpret when I say I like The Rise of Skywalker that I'm like, I'm not saying I think it's a phenomenal movie. I'm just saying I liked it better than Last Jedi. But even I can say that, yeah, that sequel trilogy was fucked up. I'm not crazy on that. I'm not really crazy on some of the other stuff they've done. Okay, I don't know. Well, I'm caught, but I do like Ray, and I like Daisy Ridley, and I think there is potential for that character. So, all right, you know, I'm going to wait for more information. Got so-and-so as a director. Who else is going to be in the cast? What's this? You know what I mean? Like I never try to hate on something before I've seen it. You know, that's me. Steve Ross says, Dave, got a chance to watch Oppenheimer yet? I have not watched Oppenheimer yet. I still have to watch it. But I will. Okay, I've got all the super chats, right? Just want to make sure. Scrolling back. Let me see here. I'm just scrolling back. Geeked Out Turtle Fan 43 says, talking to Tyler. I thought that said Dave for some reason. Geeked Out Turtle Fan says, Dave, if Friday the 13th is the next reboot, what do you think is the next line? Oh, next in line, Texas. Well, Texas has already been rebooted on Netflix. I think they'll just continue that. Nightmare, Child's Play, something else in the 70s. I would say Nightmare. I think Nightmare is something that I don't know what the Craven Estate wants to do, but I think Nightmare is definitely something that, I think it's something that needs to be able to, is next in line. No, I don't know if it's next in line, but it's in the line. It's in the line. And I think it definitely, there's interest, and they want to get that going. They want to bring Freddy back, whether that's for the small screen or the silver screen, I don't know, but they definitely want to bring him back. All right, folks. Well, listen, that's going to do it for me on episode 244 of McRae Live. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you to my channel members for being members. Again, if you want to join the channel here, the join button is below. Make sure you do. We're watching Thanksgiving this Friday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our next episode of Horror Movie Nights, but that's level number 2 only on my channel. So if you want to become a member and help support the channel, that's one way to do it. Thank you to my moderators, of course, Frank Reicher, Tab of the Short, Darren Sands, Chris Baber, Cody Cody Snyder and Andrew Stevens. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you to all the super chats that came in today and the non-super chat ones. And if you're watching live or after the fact, jump into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts on anything I had to talk about here today. Let me know your opinions and thoughts. Keep it clean. Keep it, civil. Keep it civil. But let me know your thoughts on Friday the 13th, Jason Blum, or like I said, anything that I talked about here today on the channel. I would like to know. You are all amazing. Thank you for tuning in. I will be back soon with another episode of McRae Live at some point, and another topic. Have a great rest of your Monday, and I will talk to you all soon. Alrighty. In the meantime and in between time, I will talk to you soon. Cheers.